Beirut, shock has turned to anger over that explosion that left at least 157 people dead and thousands more injured. French President Emmanuel Macron toured the devastation today. He was met with large crowds of people shouting "revolution," begging Macron not to give aid to the government. Macron promised that France's support for the city would not wind up in corrupt hands. Later, people could be seen throwing water bottles at Lebanese politicians. There is growing evidence Lebanese officials knew about the nearly 3,000 tons of ammonium nitrate that sat in the Beirut port for years and set off this week's deadly blast. Meanwhile, international aid from all over the world has begun to arrive in the city, where up to 300,000 people are now homeless. Canada has committed up to $5 million in humanitarian aid for Beirut, but the federal government says it will be funneled through trusted aid organizations. So what will that look like? Earlier today, we spoke with Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe from Shawinigan, Quebec. And a note, this conversation took place before U.S. President Donald Trump announced a tariff on Canadian aluminum. Welcome back to the program, Minister Champagne. Now, this blast, it's being described as one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in history. But when we talk about the context that all of this is happening in, right, there is the ongoing economic and political crisis, COVID, food shortage supplies. I just wonder, in the briefings that you're getting right now about the situation in Beirut, what are your officials telling you about how bad this situation could continue to get?
Well, it's a tragic moment, and obviously I've been talking twice to the foreign minister, the new foreign minister of Lebanon. I also talked to the former colleague, just to assess the situation. I mean, our thoughts are obviously with the families of the victims. We've been also making sure that our staff there, our diplomatic staff, is fine. We had one minor casualty. We have 20 of our staff, which their apartments have been damaged, so we are making sure the health and safety of our people. But more broadly, we want to be there to respond. I mean, this is an historic moment for Lebanon. Canada has been with Lebanon at every step of the way in the past, and it will continue in the future. What you've seen this morning as the announcement of the $5 million and the $1.5 million to the Lebanese Red Cross is only a first step. I mean, we're looking at many things. We're looking at private donation and how we can facilitate that. There's also a number of companies in Canada which have reached out and would like to send medical supplies and food supplies. So we're looking with the Department of Defense, how can we work together to facilitate that. There's also issues around food security. We know that the silos have been damaged, that food is going to become an issue. So I've been talking to the president of Cereals Canada to try to facilitate between the potential producers and exporters and the government of Lebanon. I've been speaking, I would say, in the last 48 hours constantly with the community, and everyone wants to do everything that we can to be at the forefront of the response, and that's what we're coordinating right now.
Yeah, Minister Gould was fairly clear this morning that aid is not going to flow through the government, but I wonder, there has been a report suggesting that the French might seek to tie any aid to political reforms in Lebanon as a way of trying to address the political crisis in the midst of this broader humanitarian crisis. Is that something that Canada would consider being a part of, tying aid to political reform?
Well, we're very aware. I mean, we've listened to the communities. We've listened to many who have raised the issue around governance. But I think in time of emergencies, our first priority is to help people, is to help in the search and rescue effort, to try to provide supplies, to save lives. We're very much in the step now of saving lives. Mm-hmm. And then there'll be the reconstruction. We're well aware of the challenges that people have in Lebanon when it comes to governance. And that's why we've said, as you've seen in the first step, that we would be working first with the Red Cross, and then we're also identifying other agencies, NGOs, which are present in the country. We want to deliver. We want to be there for the Lebanese people. That's the key message. They are the ones we care about.
Does that include, I mean, we saw people in the streets today, demanding the fall of the Lebanese government. Is that part of being there for the Lebanese people, pushing for political reform?
What I would say, in times of crisis for now, it's to try to address the immediate needs of the people. I've received from the foreign minister of Lebanon yesterday the emergency supplies they need. A lot of that is around medical supplies. You know that a lot of the medical supplies was already directed at the COVID crisis. And now, obviously, my understanding and based on the reports that I've seen, a number of these facilities have been damaged. So we're going to be trying to help in replenishing. That's why we're working also with the UN, because when crises like that happen, we need to coordinate. But what I can assure you, the Lebanese community is key to Canada. We have more than 250,000 people of Lebanese descent in Canada. I've been talking to provincial counterparts, the community, and we're going to be standing together to make a difference. First and foremost, we're there for the Lebanese people. We have always been there, and we will make sure that everything we do is to promote freedom and democracy in the country. But now, I think what people expect from Canada is to be there to help and save lives.
Okay, we only have a few minutes with you, and I do want to ask you about China as well, because we know that there's now another Canadian facing a death sentence in China because of drug trafficking. Do you believe that these death sentences that we are seeing, is that politicized? Is it fit into the broader political pressure, political challenges, particularly around the Meng Wanzhou case?
Well, let me say we're profoundly concerned. We oppose the death penalty. That's very well known. We have said it time and time again to the Chinese government. We'll continue to do that. These consular cases, we follow very closely. Our officials attended the sentencing. We are profoundly disturbed by that. And we oppose death penalty at every step of the way. Now, when it comes to the broader relationship, as you know, it's complex, it's multidimensional. We're advocating for the release of Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor. We are also advocating on the international scene, taking steps against arbitrary detention. This is very troubling. But I'd say I would look at all these cases for what they are. In this one, we have been, and we're going to be following that and making sure, and I think it's well known by the Chinese authorities, that Canada opposed the death penalty in all cases.
I just want to be crystal clear, though, because we do spend, and understandably, a lot of time talking about the cases of the two Michaels, but these cases where Canadians or people with Canadian citizenship are facing death sentences, do you understand that to also be part of the political pressure being placed on this country?
Well, we engage with China with eyes wide open. I would say on this case, the sentencing and the facts and circumstances surrounding the case, we've been following through. I don't want to prejudge, but I think that we are looking very, very closely. What matters is to send a very clear signal, not only as Canada, but as the international community, that we oppose strongly the death penalty. In all cases. And that's the point we're making to the Chinese authorities, and that we also have been very vocal in asking the Chinese authority to respect the Vienna Convention, to give us consular access to all the detainees. You talk about Michael Kovrig and Spavor, but we have We have Mr. Schallenberg. So we are following all these cases. We are working also with the international community. And we are speaking up and standing up for the rights we have under the Vienna Convention and try to provide the best protection to Canadians which are detained in China.
Now, you have left the door open to sanctions against Beijing over human rights violations. And here we're talking about the broader picture, also issues involving Hong Kong, for instance. I wonder, are you any further along on that road? Are you any closer towards sanctioning members of the Chinese regime?
Well, I'm happy you asked the question, because I think when Canadians are looking around, they will see there are very few countries around the world who have been speaking up for the defense of human rights, whether it's about the Uyghur, whether it's about Hong Kong, whether it's about other violations. And what we've been doing, obviously, we've been speaking up and standing up with a number of Five Eyes partners at every step of the way, and we'll continue. But what we're trying to do also is to broaden the coalition, because we think that when we act as the international community, we have a bigger impact. And I think when Canadians look around, they'll see that Canada has not been leading. Canada has been leading, has not been following, would be at the, I would say, at the center of all these discussions when it came to the Uyghur, when it came to Hong Kong, when it came even to Taiwan. So I would say that now what I've been advocating with colleagues around the world is to make sure that we broaden the coalition, that there are more voices that believe in human rights and that we can speak with one voice when we see issues like that. And we'll continue to do so, working with the international community, adding voices to the defense of human rights. This is core to our foreign policy, and we certainly want to have a broader voice, I would hope, from the international community. Canada is there at every step of the way, but now I think it's also the time to broaden the voice of the international community and standing up for human rights.
One domestic question before you go about the situation involving We Charity. We are still, of course, waiting for rulings from the Ethics Commissioner, but we have been asking cabinet ministers about this week, and I'd like you to explain to Canadians what the rationale would be for letting someone who repeatedly violates ethics rules keep their job, if indeed that is the finding of the Ethics Commissioner.
Well, I think, the Prime Minister testified, the Minister of Finance testified. I think what people have seen is that, mistakes were made. Corrections or processes in terms will be improved. Excuses have been provided, but I think at some stage...
You mentioned improvements, and I think Canadians would be very interested to know what sorts of changes might result from this.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that as Cabinet and as government, we'll be looking at and improving that. I mean, Canadians are in right to expect, but I think the explanations, Canadians will see there was no intention to mislead or to engage in any act or mission that would be in a way contrary to the spirit of ethics that should be followed by everyone. I think that what the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and colleagues have said is that errors were made, apologies were given, and now it's about processes to make sure that these things don't happen anymore. You always learn as a government or as an organization to make sure that you can do better next time. And I think Canadians have understood that. And now, we're in the middle of a crisis. There's a lot to do. And I think Canadians expect us to get down to business, learn from the mistakes, and learn as well how we can do better in the future and get down to the business of government.
Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you very much for speaking with us today. François-Philippe Champagne.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.